So welcome to the webinar this afternoon. There's quite a big population that we're expecting to be attending this. So I'm sure people will just be joining as we start the session. But it's a warm welcome for myself, Damion Wonfor, and my colleague Monica Ross.
Welcome.
Hi, Monica. Thanks for taking the time to do this today as well. So the session title is Keeping Fit for Purpose, and we'll talk about that in a short while in terms of our intention for running this session, specifically at the end of the year as well, when we're thinking about our self-care as coaches. But Monica, just before I hand over to you, just to help everybody settle and arrive, is there anything else you'd like to say just at the start of the session?
No, just I'm really wanting to welcome you all for taking the time out from probably what's a very busy day at a busy time of the year, and just inviting you to really take this space for yourself. And yeah, I hope that you'll find it inspiring and supportive.
Thank you, Monica. And just to say that although we're not using video today, we have got a few slides that we want to use just to support the conversation that we're going to be having. And really just from myself and Monica's point of view, so Monica and I work together training and supervising coaches, and part of the work that we've been running this year is really supporting coaches to come into a really I suppose intense space to focus and refocus on their self-care as coaches. So we've been working together for quite a number of years now. So Monica, just before we talk a bit more about the session and do a bit of setup, how about we just help everybody arrive?
Yeah, very conscious that we've all come from something before this space. So just like you would with a coaching session, it's really important that we arrive fully into this space together. So I'm going to invite you to put down any pens or paper that you might be holding at the moment, and really just make good contact between your feet and the ground. It's almost like sending your mind down into your feet, allowing yourself to really feel the connection between your feet and your shoes or whatever you're wearing, and beginning to breathe slowly up your back as if your breath is a spiral, just allowing spaciousness to come in, a sense of lightness, and noticing that your spine becomes more upright as you breathe up. And then leaving a long, slow exhale, twice as long as our inhale. And I'll do it out loud so you get a sense. And again, with the breath spiraling downwards into the earth, the sense of letting go of anything that you don't need in this space for this 45 minutes or so. And we'll do that 2 more times just to really give the body a sense of relaxation. So again, breathing up your back, allowing the breath to be like a spiral, spiraling upwards, bringing in spaciousness and clarity. And then a long, slow exhale again down into the earth, letting go of anything you don't need right now. And 1 more breath up the back. And this time just see if you can get a sense of lightness and uplift. And as you exhale this time, think of somebody or something that makes you smile or brings warmth to your heart. And as we do that, what we're doing is bringing in oxytocin when we bring in that inner smile. That's the connection or the rapport chemical. And the long, slow exhale helps us to let go of cortisol, which is the stress chemical. It drains it slowly out of our system, so we have more access to our clear thinking and our creativity. And now let's become aware of the energy that is around our body. The heat that emanates from the edges of our body is part of our energy field. So just become aware of that heat and see if you can, with your mind, allow it to expand equally in all four corners of the room. And what if you were able to take up your full space in this space today and in every interaction? So just notice, and we give the mind an inquiry. What if my energy were equal and even to the left and right of me? And allow the body to find that. And what if my energy were equal and even to the back and front of me? And what if my energy were equal and even above my head and below my feet? And just notice a sense of coming home to yourself, a place of resourcing. And if we extend our energy to the full four corners of the room, and even beyond to include each other, and all those who will join the call later, or who might even listen in afterwards. And the message is, we are in this together. It's a benevolent message. And lastly, to bring in a quality of some sort of energy quality that allows you to have a resource from the inside, a sense of being supported by something. It could be openness, kindness, generosity, trust. And others might feel that from the outside. And I'm inviting you to allow your body to give you that word rather than your head, your whole body. And I've been working with light and lightness for about a year. So when I say that word to my body, it gives me a sense of a tingle, a warmth, an openness. So just notice what happens in your own body. And we call in just 5% of that. What if I had 5% more of that quality in my being right now? Where would I notice it? And just letting a moment or two for that to be felt in your being. That sense of connection to yourself, connection to inner resources. And as you enjoy that, I'm going to hand back to Damion.
Thanks, Monica. So from this more sort of spacious awareness now, just going to invite you just to check in around your intention for joining this call. You know, keeping fit for purpose in terms of what we're speaking to you when you're thinking about your own self-care as a coach. There's a couple of questions on the screen. So what do you want to achieve from this session? And then how do you need to be to get the most from our time together, which is your side of the learning contract. So maybe just take a moment to reflect on those questions. And Monica and I would really appreciate, you know, if you have got any thoughts on those in terms of what you'd like to get from today's session, just adding those to the chat panel, just so we get a sense of some of the intentions from the people that are listening to the session. So it'd be great just to see some thoughts coming through on the chat panel when people are ready in terms of what you'd like to get from today's call. And whilst you're doing that, I'm just going to just talk briefly about some housekeeping as well. So, you know, on these sessions, it's helps if you shut down any other applications that you got over, because sometimes they connect to so we reduce the transmission speed of the webinar. Useful to have a pen and paper handy, as Monica mentioned pens earlier, you know, just so you can capture some of your thoughts as we're working through the session. Because we are going to try and make this interactive as much as we can for you, rather than us just talking at you. We will try and have some pauses and some conversation at certain points. And just finally to mention, the session will be recorded and so it will appear on our YouTube channel. So you just need to look up YouTube and look at Catalyst Wonfor, and you'll see the various webinars that we've recorded over the past 12 months on there. And it's great just to hear some of your intentions, really. So I can see on the screen there, spark new thinking about self-care for coaches, 45 minutes of fresh oxygen, tried and tested methods, self-care in the moment, stopping in a busy week, an opportunity to ground myself at the end of this busy period and transition from work to family, how to sustain self-care now and in the future, taking a moment to stop and rejuvenate. So there's some thoughts, Monica, as we start this session.
Yes, lovely to read them.
And it sort of talks a bit, Monica, I think, to our purpose of running this session as well, based on some experiences that we've been having. And so maybe if I just talk a bit about my side of why we did this, Monica, and then you can add some thoughts.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So I suppose why fit for purpose? Well, a number of years ago now, I was having a conversation with a client of mine who purchases coaching, actually, and we were just talking about some of his experiences of working with executive coaches. And he looked at me and paused, and he said to me, the thing is, Damion, I'm sick to death of coaches approaching to work with me in this organization when they look like they're on the edge of burnout themselves. And that sort of comment really made me think. And as a result of that, actually, it sparked Monica and I coming together to run retreats now for coaches, really, all around this. Because I think, as a coach trainer, I'm very passionate about making sure that coaches that train with me really start to consider not just what enables them to be present with their clients, but also what enables them to really respond to what the client needs, rather than perhaps being worn down by life and therefore not being in the best place when they're working. So that really sort of sparked a conversation with Monica and I, where we were thinking about this time of year and just some of the conversations we've been having with our supervisees around self-care, and hence why we wanted to run this session today. Monica, anything from your side you'd just like to add to that?
Absolutely. I suppose for me, I find, in supervision, I'm resourcing coaches quite a lot. And one of the things I'm very aware of, it's important that we make self-care a practice, that it's not just something we do when we notice we're exhausted. So, I talk to supervisees about what you've just said there, Damion, that other people notice when the coach isn't at their best. The client notices, and it's almost like an energetic message to the client saying, I'm talking to you about looking after yourself, but actually I'm not really doing it. And the client sees and feels the mismatch. So if we're trying to create a different space for a client to come into, it's really, really important that energetically we are living it, we are walking our talk, and that it's not just a nice to do every now and again, that it really is a lived commitment. You can hear I'm pretty passionate about this, and it is a call to action. I find myself having to make sure that I do this so that when I'm talking to others, they know I really am doing it. And just to add the piece, I suppose, it is that piece about being present and being able to respond, and having a really clean space for the client to come into, a clean and healthy space. So I'll come off my little pod now, my pedestal, and because I'm getting very passionate, I can feel it. Back to you, Damion.
I agree, and I think you talking there about the clean space, Monica, especially as an internal coach. How do I keep myself really clean? So, even if I'm completely resonating with the field and the I suppose the content of the session, but how do I, move into the session and I suppose ground myself in the session, and then also think about how I leave the session as well back into my work. So, I'm keeping myself in that sort of clean space. real challenges, I think.
And just to add to that, this morning early, I had a session with somebody who had just had, a session with another client. I was supervising this person, and they had been working with a client before coming into my call. And I actually had to spend the first few minutes inviting them just to come back into presence with me and with their body, because they had been quite impacted by, just the quality of a challenging coaching situation. So really to make sure that we space out, take time between sessions, not tumble from one meeting into a session. Making sure, for example, that we find something to change our state, our energy between one meeting and the next meeting, so that we really are able to be fully present to ourselves and to the other.
And I think, Monica, what we experience as we, do more and more coaching, we do move from that place of preparing what we're going to do with the client to actually start to become more aware of the importance of how we're going to be in that session. And it's that sort of being shift that often takes place. And I just wanted to perhaps, we ran a session a few months ago around the container. But this piece around holding, Monica, and energetic holding, I just wondered whether perhaps you might talk a little bit about that.
I often talk about the idea of a container, and creating that the coach, to some extent, the coach is both the instrument and the container of the work, because how we show up is it really is very impactful for the person who's coming into the space. And I use a metaphor quite often when I'm talking, which is, I have here two tuning forks. I won't ding them here, but they're two different keys. And when I ding one of them, you get one sound, an A key, and when you ding the other, you get a C. When I ding them together, the lower one joins the higher one. And this is my metaphor for, if we're able to go into a space and really hold our energy at a healthy, clear vibration, then whatever state the other person comes in, we can calm their system, regulate their system, and call them into a place of real presence where they can get the most benefit from the session. So the idea of, a container, that if we're aware of that, it's not just the physical environment, where we meet the client, it's us as well. It's, to me, that's a really important awareness to be holding.
Thank you, Monica. So, I just wanted to build on that just by, reconnecting with a framework, a model that I really like from Professor Paul Gilbert from the Compassionate Mind Foundation. And I'm really sharing this today to think about, where our clients are. So it's quite a simplified model which looks at what's happening for us, what's happening for our clients, in terms of the different emotional systems that they're operating in. And maybe, Monica, as I'm talking about this, I'd encourage you to think about your clients as well, and I'll pause in a moment and get everybody listening to think about their clients as we're working through this. So it looks at these three different emotional systems. So if we start with the blue circle, which is the drive and resource seeking system. So this system, the emotions really activate us. Where you may have heard of the sympathetic nervous system, the arousal that takes place. But in this system, the emotions are really about helping us detect and be interested in and take pleasure in securing important resources. So the emotions such as excitement, pleasure, drive, vitality, these emotions all direct our attention, our thinking, and our behaviors in relationship to these emotions. So when we're experiencing these emotions, they're specifically shifting our attention, our behaviors to achieve and to attain what we're driven to achieve in our life. And then we have the red sort of system. So this is really around the threat and self-protection system. So still the sympathetic nervous system. So again, when we think of the chemistry involved, cortisol, adrenaline, etc. But this system is really about helping us detect and respond to threats and harms. So the source of emotions like fear, anxiety, anger, jealousy, and disgust. Again, these emotions drive our thinking and behavior in particular ways. But of course, the threat comes on very quickly. And actually, this system is usually conditioned in terms of its response. So it's instantaneous. So it's not cognitive. We're not thinking about it to turn this system on. It's often described as the trigger happy system. And these emotions, well, we could describe them as being fast and powerful. And often we'll be in them before we're aware of it. The red system will shut off the green system, which is about calming. So it's really about, what threatens us in terms of when we respond in this system. And then finally, we have the green system, which is probably the most underdeveloped in the West. This is a soothing and affiliation system. So it's linked to the parasympathetic nervous system, which is all about slowing down, rest and digest. This system is linked to feelings of contentment in the situation. So, we're not feeling threatened or driven to get what we want when we're connected to this emotional system. So emotions like peacefulness, well-being, contentment, safety, connectedness. These emotions tend to be gentler and slower acting. So they also influence our attention, our thinking, our behavior. But an example of that is they often soften our response to anxiety. And I think it's important to think about the fact that these emotions also help us to reason and reflect in a more positive ways. And when they direct behavior, the behavior is often, slower and calmer in terms of actions as well. So I've just named this as a framework to perhaps reflect on, when we think about our clients, where do they spend most of their time in their organizational life? So maybe just reflect on some of the clients that you work with and how they're arriving for the coaching session. Are they in blue and red or green? Maybe even think about where we're trying to take them into that space that we're holding for them in terms of being a reflective learning space. What space do we need to take them in? And so therefore, where do we need to be? What's the organizational culture that we're working in? Maybe we think about some client organizations, or if we're an internal coach, what's the organizational culture? Is it blue, red, or green? And so, Monica, as I've been naming that, what are you thinking about? What do you think of your clients?
Well, it's interesting. I find myself more and more starting each session with a coming into presence. And as you know, I work a lot with embodied practices, and I often share these with supervisees. Any supervisees who've been in a session with me will know that whether it's individual or group, I'll always start by calming the system, because I really do believe that to be able to get the most out of a session, a person needs to be fully there. And so, this VUCA world, if you think of it, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, that we're all living in, and it seems life is getting faster and faster. So for us and for our clients and organizations, it's really important that we're able to create the space. But to do that, I go back to what I said earlier about the importance of having a practice. That, if we can build in a practice of mindfulness or a practice of centering, or even, some of the self-care things we're going to look at in a few moments, that we're actually, what happens is we're teaching our body to know how to calm itself. And that automatically helps the mind to calm itself. So the body learns slowly and by repetition. That's why we need to build a regular practice. And when we need it badly, it's able to kick in faster. So we're able to access that place of calm, a place where we can think more clearly and where we can support another person to regulate their system. So there's a lovely quotation by Bruce Lee that in stress we don't rise to our, our aspirations. We fall to the level of our practice. And I've seen that in myself, and I've seen it in others. So the more you can build a steady, simple practice, it doesn't have to be anything elaborate. It really does help you to be more resourceful.
Thank you, Monica. And I agree. I mean, I know from my own coaching practice and supervision practice that, generally I do, move clients into that green space through, doing some mindfulness together. I mean, obviously that's something that underpins my practice. And, as years and years have gone on, obviously with the interest in mindfulness, it's become something that people are more open to. I know a lot of my clients are in the blue and the red space, so even small things around, meeting them outside their work, and trying to encourage them to take some time before they go into the coaching session and outside. I try to sort of create an intention for them moving into the green before they're with me. And sometimes we might need to move out of green to blue in the coaching session as well. So, it's not all about the green, but if we're trying to create a space for them to do their best thinking, we know that will come from if the coach is in that green space. We know about sort of emotional, I suppose, resonance now, and on the screen you can see some examples there of this idea of us attuning to our client, a bit like your tuning forks, Monica. And we can't do that if we're not in a place of, groundedness, and presence as a coach. So this whole piece for us about self-care is such an important piece that's often overlooked by coaches, especially when, the work starts to build and build and build. So we wanted to share with you, I suppose, just a few more thoughts around this. And Monica, you had mentioned being a coach in a VUCA world. This term that is often used now. So, I thought it may be useful for us to reconnect with this research if you're happy to talk about that.
Yeah, this was a piece of research done in 2014, and it was to look at, what was affecting coaches, and it was in the context of something called challenging coaches and challenging coaching. And, if you look there, the level of how coaches were impacted by what was going on in the coaching, and quite often coaches were left feeling that, they had lost confidence in themselves. They felt quite disempowered. So this would have shown up in supervision. When they came for supervision, these would have been some of the themes coming in. So you can see there, felt insecure, 80%. Personally affected by topics discussed. This morning, the coach that I was working with was actually, feeling really a bit sad and a bit affected by what was shared with him in a coaching session. So, carrying it around afterwards, how do we support ourselves as coaches to be able to, yes, there are things going on in the world and we're hearing them and we're holding space, but how can we support ourselves afterwards? Frustrated that the problems could not be resolved. That would certainly lead a coach to feel really disempowered. And, it's that piece of responsibility and who's responsible. And sometimes in organizations, if the coaching isn't set up well, it's almost like it's set up for failure, that the coach, no matter how hard they work, if there isn't good contracting, tripartite contracting, that can have a huge effect on the resilience of the coach and the client, and feeling emotionally exhausted. So they're quite high percentages, as you can see. And these are the things that sometimes show up when we're working as supervisors. We're restoring and supporting people back to a place of being able to trust themselves and work well as coaches. Do you want to add anything to that, Damien, from your own experience as a supervisor?
I just want to pick up a question as this come through again about what is a VUCA world,
Mm,
Monica. So just really to say this was a phrase that came from some work of Bob Johansson, who coined the phrase, we're living in a VUCA world. It was linked to strategy in the military context.
exactly.
Um, and so as Monica said, the VUCA stands for volatility, uncertain, complex and ambiguous. And just when we think about our lives and not just the speed and technology, but also how we're impacted by world events, it really sort of is a great phrase for how people are experiencing life now. I think I just want to say, Monica, Joe, the big thing for me is the piece around often with my supervisees about how they're taking care of themselves after a coaching session, so they can really, I suppose, unhook from some of the buttons that may have been pushed or the triggers for them. How are they really taking some time to pause? Maybe their reflective practice really helps them make sense of this and helps them prepare for the next part of their day. Because they're the types of conversations I really sort of see around certain of these areas when, there's been some contamination, if we use that word, in terms of either what they're hearing and thinking about or they're experiencing from their client system. If we go back to that, especially that red circle.
And just to add to that, that piece around self-care, we're going to talk about that in a moment, but I find even things like going for walks or swimming, something that will kind of a dedicated space for yourself. And for example, I have a boundary around I don't work at lunchtime. I really set that up about 2 years ago. And I don't work on Fridays because that's my day for self-care. Now, not everybody has that luxury, but it's something about carving out time for yourself, which is sustainable and which fits with your particular way of working, but that you really have a clear space. It's almost like you put that in your diary before you put in other things. And this time of the year, this was part of the reason for Damien and myself having it so late in the year, is that it's the platform for starting something new next year for yourself. It's an opportunity to really look at how have I been this year? How has my self-care been? And what do I want to really make a non-negotiable for the coming year so that I'm in a really good place for myself, for my family, and for my work? Feel free to jump in there, Damien.
No, I just think just because of time, Monica, we'll just move on to a bit of a reflective exercise for everybody. So, I'm sure you're all familiar with tools such as the Wheel of Life. We've just adapted this to reflect some of the conversations that we have with the people that we're supervising around this whole topic. So, thinking about some of these dimensions, you may just want to draw this, but I would encourage you to draw 8 spokes on a piece of paper and then to put these labels around the top. So as we look at this model, the top of the model, we think about nutrition, so hydration is really important when we're working in that relational space, but also just thinking about what we are putting in our bodies. So maybe as you start to think about the last week, how would you score yourself on a score of 0 to 10? 10 on the outside, 0 in the middle. How much are you taking care of yourselves in terms of what you're putting in your body? And then you have physical health. So we've all seen the stats around the importance of some physical activity every day. So again, how are we being that change for our clients? And I'm not saying we all need to be professional athletes, but in terms of role modeling, this self-care piece, how are you supporting yourself at the moment? Maybe going for a walk in nature at lunchtime, or doing some other form of physical exercise, yoga, etc. How would you rate yourself currently against that over the last week? 0 at the middle, meaning I haven't done anything, 10 on the outside, to I've been doing it something every day. And then we have emotional and mental health. So, you know, Monica's mentioned embodiment practices. For me, is my mindfulness practice, you know, something that I do on a daily basis to ensure that, you know, I suppose mentally and emotionally, I have a greater capacity for when I'm holding my clients and working with them. And then, you know, the next one's sleep. You know, we've all seen the research about the importance of sleep for the brain. Again, you know, we require 7 hours on average a night. So, you know, how are we, you know, taking care of ourselves and getting the appropriate amounts of sleep? Again, just perhaps score yourself against those. You know, where would you say you are now? And Monica, just to change the voice, really, are you okay talking about the other ones?
Yeah, so, you know, looking there at supervision, and supervision is about reflective space. So, you know, both Damion and myself are supervisors, but it could also be, you know, your own reflective space or peer supervision, for example, or some place where you reflect with colleagues so that you're able to create a space to get a different perspective on things and to let things go a little bit, to get a different vision on things. And then moving to the spiritual, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean religious. It's about your sense of, you know, what's your purpose in life? What is it that kind of supports you when things are tough? What are the beliefs that you hold that are sustaining beliefs? Um, what sort of things can you turn to? Maybe it's some reading, some inspirational poems that support you, and that connects to the next piece, which is inspiration and posse comes from embodied leadership. You know, the idea that we can call on archetypes, um, maybe famous people that we can imagine that if they were in our situation, what would they be doing? And it could even be members of our family that we admire, and, you know, that we think, how would my granddad have handled this? Or, you know, that we feel their support around us. For example, our family, our friends, our colleagues that really believe in us, or, for example, mentors or bosses who've, it's almost like their hands are at your back. So, you know, to connect yourself to a sense of inspiration. It could also be beautiful places that you've been, that the minute you think of it, your state has changed and you feel resourced. And positive relationships, you know, obviously we can't always have perfect relationships, but for the most part, we can work and you know, have the sorts of dialogues and conversations with colleagues, with ourselves, and with those we care about. And also, I suppose, to be careful about, you know, what we take in, and, you know, it's very close to nutrition there, but it's about emotional nutrition as well. You know, are we listening to too many negative stories on the news? Are we allowing ourselves to balance the inspiration with the kind of, I suppose, fake news and all of that stuff in social media, so that we're feeding ourselves emotionally and spiritually as well. Um, yeah, so just notice for yourselves where, which of those really speak to you. You know, there are labels, you might have different labels yourself, and just be curious about how you'd like to maybe grow some of those areas for yourself in order to sustain yourself and your self-care. How does that sound, Damion?
No, I agree. I think, you know, what this is about long term. You know, when we think about some of the exercises that Monica and I teach when we're working with coaches around how to come into presence, well, they're sort of in the moment techniques. These, I suppose, facets of the wheel are really around long-term self-care. So, you know, we are really fit for purpose. We are that change that, you know, our coachees are often, you know, wanting in their lives as well.
Mm. I'm just noticing a question by Anna. I would like to hear more about how to grow spiritually when you're not religious and don't want to be.
Mm.
Um, So thanks for that, Anna. You know, I would class myself as being spiritual rather than religious. And I suppose, you know, I have a practice each day of starting by reading something that inspires me. I have, you know, some books that are my go-to books. Um, you know, Amoda Ma Jeevan. I'm happy to put the name. Let's just see, can I put it in the chat? Is a book that I often turn to because it's quite inspiring. She's an author that well, you may have your own, and others would be, for example, John O'Donoghue, who wrote Anam Cara, just small little snippets to feed myself at breakfast time. I light 2 candles, and I kind of read and reflect on little pieces, little snippets that will support me to be inspired for the start of the day. So they're just two. Amodimaj even has written a few books that are quite inspiring, I find. And you know, you may have your own ones, but it's about feeding your soul, your spirit, as much as feeding your body. And feel free to come back to me, Anna, to know if that's answered your question.
And I think I just want to add to that, Monica. You know, for me, it's really about what makes your heart sing. You know,
Yeah.
those things in your life that you feel connected to a greater sense of all of life, I suppose. You know, so this could be for me nature. You know, when I live in the countryside, and for me, when I'm out in nature, that's part of my spiritual practice because I feel connected. You know, watching a sunset. You know. That sense of really connecting with a sense of my purpose is about making a difference. And, you know, when I feel connected to that, that's the spiritual practice for me, really. So I'd say, what makes your heart sing, Anna? And I'd focus on that.
Just seeing. Thanks, Anna. She just wrote, thank you both. You're welcome.
So just it'd just be useful just because I'm conscious of time, and Monica and I've just got a couple of other things we want to say, but just any other reflections or questions at this stage. So again, feel free to add those to the chat panel, just so we can sort of see how this is landing with you at the moment. Any other reflections or questions at this stage? Okay, and while we're waiting for any more to come through, I suppose we did just want to talk a little bit, Monica, around not just, I suppose, finding a practice, but also just those bits around, we've spoken a bit about preparing for a session. So, you know, with whether that's an embodiment practice, a mindfulness practice, but what about ending a session in terms of, you know, that sort of energy management? So maybe anything that you encourage coaches to do that you find works.
I think it's really important to, you know, as I said, first of all, create space. I usually allow at least half an hour between one session and the next so that I can just take a sip of water. I can do some sort of an exercise to bring myself back into my own body. Because when I'm connected to another, I'm very much connected to them. And so, for example, I have 1 or 2 practices which maybe one of them or 2 of them I could share with you here. One is called the change breath. Yeah, maybe I'll just invite you to join me in this. I learned this when I was training as a supervisor. So you just, again, make good contact between your feet on the ground and become more upright in your body. And then you breathe in through your nose. And then give a short, sharp breath out through your mouth, like, so we do that 3 times. Breathe in through your nose and short, sharp breath. So you can hear the quality of the breath that I'm giving. One more, breathing in through your nose. Because that changes your breath. It changes all of the oxygen in your system, and it just brings you back into your own body, and it helps you to let go. I mean, another thing is just to stand up and kind of give a good shake off. And from Reiki, I do something called dry brushing, which is that, again, make good contact between your feet on the ground. And with your left hand, just brush your hand down your right arm, so straight down, like, so I'm doing that as I brush my hand right down my right arm. Then taking my right arm, I brush straight down my left arm. Then I brush down my right arm again, so opposite arms, and the opposite again. And all it's doing is just shifting the energy from one part of you. So it's a symbol of letting go and cleaning. And you could even kind of rub your hands together like you might if they were dirty, and just blow. Sorry, we don't have the visual, but you can get the sense of what I mean. It's like you're blowing away whatever energy was with you. And even just getting up and stamping your feet can be a way to clear away the energy. So simple things to bring you back into your own body and to symbolically say, I'm now closing off this energy. And Damion, actually, there's a nice one that you refer to sometimes from the systemic work.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yes, sure. So, I mean, people who've trained with me or been supervised with me as well, I tend to have a systemic ritual that I'll say at the end of a session, which is just a couple of sentences, which, after the client has left me or I've left the client, I just take a moment to sort of take a breath, and then I'll just say, I'll leave with you what's yours, and I'll take with me what's mine. And I say that, and then often I'll go for a walk if I notice that I've been impacted by whatever it is that the client's been working through, just as a way of me coming back into myself before, I spend some time just reflecting and making sense of that. And then often that will involve some mindfulness. So, I think they really encourage you to think about how you can take care of yourself after the session and really sort of close down. So I'm conscious of time, and we said 45 minutes. So just really a couple of things. Next year we've got a series of webinars that are going to be happening each month. Please check the website out just to connect with those. And Monica and I are planning our retreats for coaches in 2019. So there'll be one in the UK in September, and we'll be doing one in Ireland in the first part of the year. So again, please check the website because there'll be information on there for you. So Monica, anything you would like to say at the end, just to close down from your side?
I think, I'm just really enjoying even the interaction and the questions that have come forward. And I hope that you've had benefit from it. I wouldn't mind seeing one or two comments in the chat, maybe a final word to us of what you've received from this space. And yeah, I wish you the very best for the coming year. And I would invite you to take space at some stage before you step into the new year to really plan and to create an awareness of how you're going to look after yourself in the coming year. So thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you. And just really to add, we look forward to connecting with you again in 2019, and have a great end of the year and a great Christmas. So yeah, all the best, and please take some time to consider this stuff.